The vast territories conquered by Alexander the Great, extending from the rugged landscapes of Macedonia to the sun-drenched plains of Persia, often present an image of seamless unity, a grand mosaic of diverse cultures woven together under the banner of a singular vision. Yet the reality of his empire was far more intricate, a complex tapestry of cultural differences and regional loyalties that belied the superficial allure of cohesion. In those early years of conquest, the thrill of victory surged through the ranks of his army, igniting a fervor that could almost mask the underlying fractures and tensions waiting to emerge. The clatter of armor and the thud of marching feet echoed through the ancient cities, while the pungent scent of sweat and dust mingled with the incense wafting from altars that dotted the land. As Alexander marched through the diverse landscapes of his newly acquired realm, the kaleidoscope of cultures he encountered shaped not only the territories, but also the psychological fabric of his reign. The vibrant colors of Persian silks and the melodic strains of the local dialects filled the air, creating a dissonant yet enchanting backdrop to his ambition. Here, in the heart of these newly subjugated lands, Alexander believed he would forge a new world, a fusion of East and West that would stand as a testament to his greatness. His vision of unity was intoxicating, a promise of shared prosperity and mutual respect among the myriad peoples of his empire. However, nestled within this dream were the seeds of discord, cultural tensions that simmered just below the surface. The administrative challenges Alexander faced in managing such vast and varied territories were monumental. As he sought to integrate the disparate regions, he employed local governors and adapted existing systems of governance, often relying on the very structures that had ruled before him. Yet this approach was a double-edged sword. The local elites, some eager to retain their power, while others chafed under the yoke of foreign rule, created a precarious balance that could easily tip into chaos. The whispers of dissent were often drowned out by the clangor of swords, yet they persisted, weaving through the ranks of his army like a shadow, a reminder of the fragility of his conquests. The initial successes of Alexander's campaigns bolstered the perception of unity across his empire. Celebratory parades filled the streets of cities like Babylon and Persepolis, as soldiers, newly decorated with honors, marched proudly alongside local citizens, their faces alight with the excitement of shared triumph. The splendor of the royal court dazzled visitors from distant provinces, presenting an image of a harmonious realm where cultural exchange flowed freely. Yet beneath this veneer of success lay the precarious nature of allegiance, as the conquered populations grappled with the stark reality of their subjugation. Within the mind of Alexander, the desire for unity was fueled by an ambition that bordered on obsession. He envisioned a legacy that would transcend his own life, power that would be immortalized in the annals of history. His aspirations were not merely for conquest, they were a yearning for a world united under his banner, a blend of tradition and innovation that would honor the diverse cultural heritage of his subjects. This vision often obscured the bitter realities faced by those he ruled. While he sought to be seen as a liberator, the specter of tyranny loomed large for many who had known autonomy before his arrival. The silenced voices of the vanquished echoed in the chambers of power, their grievances buried beneath the weight of imperial ambition. As the months turned into years, the initial thrill of conquest began to give way to the stark complexities of governance. The vast distances that separated various parts of the empire posed logistical nightmares, with communication often hindered by treacherous terrain and local rivalries. Alexander's attempts to impose a singular administrative framework clashed with long-standing customs, igniting resentment and resistance among those who viewed his reforms as an encroachment on their identity. The vibrant tapestry of cultures that once promised unity began to fray, revealing the gnarled roots of conflict that lay beneath. In the quiet moments, when the clamor of the camp faded into an uneasy silence, Alexander was left alone with his thoughts, the weight of his empire pressing down upon him. He felt the burden of leadership keenly. The ambition that once drove him forward now cast long shadows of doubt. The men who had once fought valiantly by his side began to question the wisdom of their king's relentless quest for expansion. As dissent festered, whispers of rebellion crept through the ranks of his army, hastened by the discontent of those who yearned for autonomy. The illusion of unity began to dissolve like morning mist under the harsh sun. In the face of these challenges, several provinces became hotbeds of unrest, their cultural identities clashing violently with Alexander's vision. The satraps, once loyal allies, became increasingly embroiled in local politics, their ambitions sometimes aligning with the very forces that opposed him. The threads of loyalty that had appeared taut and strong began to unravel, revealing a complex web of allegiances that could shift like desert sands. Alexander's attempts to quell the unrest often met with fierce resistance, and the glory of his earlier conquests seemed to dim in comparison to the escalating difficulties of governance. The initial allure of unity that had captivated Alexander and his followers was fading into memory, replaced by a stark realization of the fragility of his empire. Each successful campaign that promised cohesion only highlighted the deep-rooted differences among peoples who had once stood as adversaries. The grand vision of a blended world began to fracture under the pressures of reality, as cultural tensions and administrative challenges loomed ever larger. In the quiet, contemplative moments of his reign, Alexander could feel the tide of his ambition shifting, a warning echoing through the corridors of power as the foundations of his empire trembled. Thus, the illusion of unity, painted with broad strokes of conquest and glory, began to reveal its complexities, offering a sobering glimpse into the inherent instability of a realm built on the ashes of countless vanquished foes. As the empire surged forward into its next chapter of history, the challenges that lay ahead would require more than military might. They would demand a delicate balancing act between cultures, a nuanced understanding of the peoples under his rule, and a reckoning with the consequences of his relentless ambition. The vibrant tapestry of his empire was far from seamless. It was a rich, chaotic blend of sights, sounds, and stories, each thread pulling in different directions, urging the architect of their fate to reconsider the very nature of unity itself.
We stand firm.
This campaign is lost. Why do we remain?
We should leave tonight, while the moon is dark. Set up the perimeter.
The ambition of Alexander the Great had always been a double-edged sword, an unquenchable fire that propelled him across continents, yet a force that threatened the very fabric of his sprawling empire. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dusty roads of the Persian provinces, the toll of his relentless aspirations was beginning to take a palpable shape. The vastness of his conquests, once a source of pride and unity, now loomed as an insurmountable challenge, testing the resilience of local governors and military leaders who found themselves clutching at the fraying edges of control. In the provinces, the air was thick with tension and uncertainty. Governors, appointed by Alexander himself, felt the weight of their dual roles, loyal subjects of a distant sovereign and reluctant stewards of their own people. The opulence of the royal courts felt a world away from the gritty realities of governance. They navigated a landscape where ancient customs clashed with the imposition of Hellenistic ideals. Every decree sent from the capital was a gamble, each one met with a mixture of trepidation and defiance. In the bustling marketplaces of cities like Babylon and Susa, merchants exchanged not just goods, but whispered grievances, the discontent simmering beneath the surface increasingly difficult to contain. The governors watched as the men under their command, once fervent in their loyalty, became shadows of their former selves. These soldiers, weary from an unending succession of campaigns, had been drawn from the farthest reaches of Macedonia, their hearts tethered to home by slender threads of longing. Each battle fought, each city besieged, had siphoned away a part of their resolve. The once vibrant banners of Alexander now fluttered listlessly, colors dulled by the dust of countless marches and the burden of despair. The world beyond the horizon had transformed into a mirage of familiarity, and the soldiers' dreams of glory morphed into restless nights filled with visions of distant hearths. As they settled into the camp at the edge of the Hyphasis River, the murmurs of dissent began to rise like an ominous tide. Men exchanged glances laden with unspoken fears, their camaraderie now tinged with the weight of shared grievances. Among them, the seasoned veteran Clytus felt the growing discord acutely. Once elevated by the favor of Alexander, Clytus now grappled with a sense of betrayal. The same ambition that had propelled them forward now left them stranded in a foreign land, far from the embrace of the familiar. The air was thick with unvoiced resentment, a silent acknowledgement that their loyalty was slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. In the flickering light of campfires, the soldiers gathered to share their tales. The jovial laughter of comrades turned into a desperate attempt to drown out the gnawing fear that had settled in their chests. They spoke of home, of loved ones waiting under the fading light of evening, of the mundane joys they had sacrificed on the altar of ambition. Yet even the storytelling was a battleground of its own. Some spoke of valor, while others whispered doubts, their words laced with a bitterness that threatened to ignite the flames of mutiny. The cracks in Alexander's carefully constructed facade of control widened, each conversation a reminder of the fragile ties that bound his empire together. Meanwhile, the campaign continued with relentless momentum, a machine driven by the fervor of conquest, yet increasingly out of touch with the men who fueled it. Reports of skirmishes and rebellions echoed through the ranks, each skirmish a reflection of the growing discontent that pulsated within the empire. As the seasons changed, so too did the mood of the troops. The whispering winds carried with them a sense of foreboding. The vast expanse of land they had traversed now seemed less like a canvas for glory and more like a labyrinth from which there was no escape. The governors, too, felt the strain of this incessant pressure. They were caught in a no-man's land of conflicting loyalties, torn between the ambition of their king and the murmurs of their own people. The sumptuous halls of their palaces now echoed with the anxiety of their decisions, each response to local unrest a delicate balancing act. They knew that to align too closely with Alexander's vision risked inciting rebellion among their constituents, while pushing back against the king could lead to dire consequences. The political landscape had morphed into a treacherous terrain where every move could spell disaster. As the autumn winds swept in, carrying with them the first chill of impending winter, the chorus of dissent grew louder. The once loyal soldiers began to voice their discontent openly, their frustration boiling over into heated debates that reverberated through the camp. They questioned the wisdom of endless campaigns that stretched into lands unknown, where the promise of glory felt increasingly like a distant dream. The sense of isolation deepened, and with it, the realization that their fates were inextricably tied to a king who seemed impervious to their suffering. Amid this growing unrest, Alexander, from his throne of ambition, remained resolute. He viewed the world through the lens of a conqueror, the boundaries of his empire a testament to his greatness. Yet even he could not ignore the strain of leadership, the weight of command that pressed down on him like the armor he donned for battle. In his mind, the horizon held not just a vision of conquest, but also a promise of unity, a belief that through his relentless pursuit, disparate peoples could be forged into a singular identity. However, the echoes of dissent and the whispered fears of his soldiers began to chip away at that vision, a reminder that ambition, if unchecked, could sow the seeds of discord within even the most formidable of empires. The echoes of those distant dreams cast a long shadow over the camp, a subtle yet growing reminder that the ambitions of one could lead to the unraveling of many. As the fires crackled and
The air over Gaugamela was thick with the scent of dust and sweat, the oppressive sun casting long shadows across the arid landscape. The day was marked by a stillness that belied the chaos soon to unfold, a tension that wrapped itself around the thousands of soldiers arrayed in serried ranks. They stood resolute and unyielding, yet beneath the surface was a current of uncertainty. They could feel it in the shifting glances of their comrades, the anxious whispers that rippled like a breeze through the formations. This was more than just a battlefield. It was a stage upon which destinies would intertwine and unravel, a place where the ambition of one man would confront the might of an empire. As Alexander rode forward, his presence emanated an electric charisma, the weight of history resting upon his shoulders. He was not merely a conqueror, he was a living embodiment of the aspirations and fears of his men, a figure whose dreams of glory soared even as doubts gnawed at the edges of his mind. The youthful king had already carved a path across the known world, yet here, against the vastness of the Persian horde, the specter of vulnerability loomed large. His gaze swept over the battlefield, taking in the towering war elephants and the disciplined ranks of Persian infantry, each soldier a testament to Darius's resolve. Yet it was not just the enemy who posed a threat. The fissures within his own command were beginning to crack the facade of unity he had carefully cultivated. The battle commenced with the clash of iron against iron, the cacophony of war exploding into a violent symphony. Amid the chaos, Alexander maneuvered his troops with the precision of a master strategist, yet every decision was underpinned by the nagging doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. His generals, men like Parmenion and Clytus, whose loyalty had once seemed unwavering, now stood as potential rivals, each harboring their own ambitions. The roar of combat seemed to echo their unspoken desires, the thundering hooves of cavalry mingling with the cries of the wounded, forming an unsettling harmony of blood and glory. The battlefield, a canvas of desperate valor and raw fear, blurred the lines between loyalty and self-interest. Victory came at a cost. The dust settled over the field, mixing with the dark pools of blood that marked the place where so many had fallen. Alexander emerged from the fray, his armor bearing the scars of battle, his heart racing with triumph, even as disquiet festered in the shadows of his triumph. The Persian forces lay shattered, their once imposing ranks now a disordered mass of defeat. But in the echoes of that victory, the first whispers of dissent began to coalesce. The aftermath of Gaugamela, while celebrated, opened a Pandora's box of ambition and rivalry among his generals, each one now questioning the future direction of Alexander's empire. In the days that followed, the camp that had once buzzed with unity now hummed with a different energy. Conversations that had previously echoed with camaraderie grew laced with suspicion. Parmenion, steadfast and cautious, found his counsel increasingly ignored. The weight of responsibility sat heavily on Alexander, yet he felt the pull of ambition urging him to forge ahead with a relentless pace, as if the momentum of victory could overshadow the cracks forming within his command. The once steadfast loyalty of his generals began to fray as the spoils of victory beckoned like sirens, promising power and influence to those willing to grasp for it. The nights became restless, filled with the murmurs of men plotting and whispering away from the watchful eyes of their king. Clytus, whose valor had shone brightly in the battle, found himself grappling with the realization that his own reputation now seemed to eclipse that of his king, a fact that gnawed at his conscience while simultaneously igniting his ambition. The intimacy of their shared experiences was slowly being replaced by a competitive tension, one that strained the fabric of their once unbreakable bond. As the embers of their camaraderie flickered, they were replaced by the cold, stark reality of ambition, a force as potent as any spear thrust in battle. The challenges to Alexander's leadership came not only from within, but were also stoked by the remnants of the Persian nobility, who, though defeated, remained influential figures within the vast territories of what had been Darius's domain. They viewed the Macedonian king with a mixture of fear and calculating ambition. The throne was now within reach, the empire a sprawling landscape of possibility, marred by the realization that it could easily slip through his fingers like sand. The loyalty of men is a fickle thing, easily swayed by the promise of power or the specter of revenge. Each day, Alexander faced the reality that his victories might be but a fleeting moment in the grand narrative of history, one where the tides of loyalty could shift with the wind. As the victors settled into a fragile peace, the seeds of dissent sprouted among the ranks. The triumph at Gaugamela, rather than solidifying Alexander's leadership, illuminated the vulnerabilities of his leadership. The very structure that had supported his rise was now threatened by factions eager to claim their share of power, their ambitions laid bare in the aftermath of the clash. The silences grew heavier, the glances more loaded. Each man was both a soldier in Alexander's army and a potential rival in a game of power that could reshape the empire. The burden of the crown weighed heavily on Alexander's brow, and he began to understand that leadership was not solely about conquest, but also about the delicate art of maintaining unity among those who fought beside him. His victories, once a source of pride, now served as a constant reminder of the fragile nature of loyalty, an understanding that forged a new resolve within him. The battlefield had taught him the importance of strategy, but the aftermath of Gaugamela revealed the intricate dance of trust and ambition that would shape the future of his empire. With every step forward, he found himself entangled in a web of consequence that threatened to unravel the very foundation of his dreams. As the sun set over Gaugamela, casting long shadows across the ground where once so much blood had been spilled, Alexander pondered the cost of ambition. It was a battle won, yet the real fight lay ahead, not against a foreign foe. In the wake of Alexander the Great's death in June 323 BCE, the vast tapestry of his empire, once woven with ambition and conquest, began to fray almost immediately. The sudden absence of a singular, commanding figure left a palpable void, one that resonated in the marble halls of Babylon, seeped into the bustling markets of Tyre, and echoed across the parched plains of Persia. In those fateful days, the air thick with uncertainty, the once unified territories of a sprawling dominion transformed into a mosaic of rival ambitions and nascent loyalties. The power vacuum birthed by Alexander's demise did not merely signal the end of an era, It initiated a frenzied scramble for control that would irrevocably alter the course of history. In the months that followed, the former satraps, those governors entrusted by Alexander to maintain order during his expansive campaigns, began to assert their authority with an urgency that belied the fragile fabric of the empire. Figures such as Antipater, Ptolemy, and Seleucus, once mere administrators in Alexander's grand design, sensed the winds of change and, emboldened by the chaos, started to carve out independent realms. Antipater, who governed Macedon and the surrounding territories, felt the weight of his responsibility intensify as he gazed upon the horizon. The lush hills of Macedon, which once felt like the cradle of his destiny, now appeared as potential battlegrounds, fraught with promise and peril. His ambition, however, was tempered by a lurking dread. He understood that loyalty could be as transient as the shifting sands of the desert. In the heart of Babylon, the great city that had served as a jewel in Alexander's crown, the air was thick with tension. Former commanders and regional leaders convened, their faces etched with the strain of uncertainty. They gathered not only for counsel, but to lay the groundwork for alliances, their whispers mingling with the distant sounds of temple bells and the rush of the Euphrates. The once unwavering confidence of Alexander's vision had been replaced by a cacophony of voices, each clamoring to be heard over the others. The erstwhile unity that marked Alexander's reign began to dissolve under the weight of local interests and age-old grievances. Ptolemy, who governed Egypt, stood at the forefront of this realignment, his heart racing with the intoxicating mix of ambition and trepidation. He had tasted both victory and the sweet wine of power, but the specter of disunity loomed large. The fertile Nile Valley, with its life-giving waters and rich harvests, beckoned, promising not just sustenance, but also opportunity. Yet the challenge of asserting control over Egypt weighed heavily on his shoulders. As he gazed out over the golden fields, each stalk of grain seemed to whisper secrets of loyalty that could shift like the winds. Ptolemy understood that loyalty of his subjects could be bought, but trust was an ever-elusive commodity. As the regional leaders began to establish their dominions, the veneer of cooperation quickly eroded, giving way to conflicts that mirrored the ambitions igniting the hearts of those who had once fought together under Alexander's banner. The expansive empire, which had taken years of blood and sweat to forge, now appeared as a jigsaw puzzle of disparate pieces, with each satrap clinging to their slice of territory as if it were a lifeline. The once loyal commanders knew that their fates were intertwined, yet irreparably fractured. They were players in a game that was both strategic and deeply personal, where betrayal loomed as a constant threat. Warrior-turned satraps clashed, their armies meeting in the dust and heat of sun-baked fields, where the clang of metal against metal rang out like a grim symphony of ambition and desperation. The blood-soaked earth was a stark reminder of the price of power, as men fought not only for land, but for the legacy of a fallen king. Seleucus, who sought to establish his authority in the eastern provinces, found himself at the center of a maelstrom, navigating alliances with former comrades turned foes, their past camaraderie overshadowed by new loyalties that shifted with the sun. He often stared into the faces of his soldiers, who were both loyal and fearful. Every man was a reflection of the uncertainty that plagued them all. The complexity of these alliances was a testament to the intricacies of human motivation. Each satrap was driven not merely by a hunger for power, but also by the echoes of Alexander's vision, which had left an indelible mark upon their psyches. The ideals of unity and conquest became double-edged swords, inspiring both noble endeavors and ruthless betrayals. In the shadowy corridors of power, the old bonds forged in the fires of war began to fray, replaced by the cold calculus of ambition and survival. As the conflicts intensified, The narratives of loyalty and betrayal became enmeshed in the very fabric of governance. In the markets of the cities, merchants and citizens began to take sides, their allegiances shifting with the tides of fortune. The laughter of children playing in the streets was juxtaposed with the distant sounds of conflict, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace. The empire's once steadfast foundation quaked beneath the weight of local loyalties, and as the dust settled on battlefields, the shifting political landscape revealed itself to be a reflection of the complex human heart, a terrain marked by ambition, fear, and the relentless pursuit of power. By the time the dust of this initial fragmentation had begun to settle, the empire that had once been a formidable entity had been splintered into rival factions, each vying for dominance. The vision of a united realm under a single ruler had been replaced by a pluralistic mosaic of aspirations, where the satraps, now warlords, were not merely governors, but the architects of their own destinies. This period of tumult, marked by both conflict and collaboration, would set the stage for the enduring legacy of the Hellenistic world, a testament to the complexities of loyalty and ambition in a landscape forever altered by the specter of Alexander the Great. The echoes of his name lingered like a ghost, haunting the ambitions of those who dared to dream beyond the confines of their fractured realms, as the empire continued to unfold in ways both unforeseen and inevitable.
The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting the once gleaming citadels of Babylon into shadow, their stone walls now crumbling echoes of an age that had burned bright and quickly faded. The vast empire that had been forged in the fires of ambition and conquest lay in tatters, a kaleidoscope of successor states, each vying for identity and power amidst the remnants of Alexander's monumental legacy. It was here, in this fractured expanse, that the profound consequences of his meteoric rise and subsequent demise began to unfold. A tapestry woven from ambition, desperation, and cultural synthesis that would shape the ancient world for centuries to come. In the wake of Alexander's death in 323 BCE, the empire he had built with unyielding vigor splintered almost immediately. His generals, known as the Diadochi, were left to grapple with the remnants of his vast territories that stretched from the Hellespont to the fringes of India. Each general harbored ambitions that mirrored their leaders in fervor and intensity, yet their vision was invariably marred by the harsh realities of governance. The fragmentation was not merely a political phenomenon, it birthed a new landscape of power struggles, where the ambitions of men gave way to the necessity of survival. The land echoed with the clatter of armored cavalry, the murmur of alliances formed and dissolved under the weight of treachery and circumstance, and the fevered prayers of people caught in the tide of history. The Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, emerging under the rule of Ptolemy I Soter, sought to cement its power through a blend of Hellenistic and Egyptian culture. The grandeur of Alexandria, with its towering library and the celebrated lighthouse, became a beacon of learning and commerce. The bustling streets, filled with the scents of exotic spices and the sounds of traders haggling, stood in stark contrast to the silences of those whose lives had been irrevocably altered by the shifting political currents. Citizens and intellectuals alike wandered the vast halls of knowledge, their minds ablaze with ideas that would eventually echo through the ages. Yet even amid this cultural renaissance, a palpable tension lingered, the fear of being engulfed by the very chaos that had toppled Alexander's empire. To the east, the Seleucid Empire emerged, sprawling across the breadth of Persia and beyond. The Seleucids struggled to maintain unity in a territory rife with diverse cultures and languages, each region a fragment of a once mighty whole.
Antioch became the nexus of Hellenistic influence, yet it was a city perpetually on the brink, its people caught between the aspirations of their rulers and the legacies of their own histories. The streets were alive with the sound of Greek philosophers debating in the agora, while Persian merchants exchanged goods and ideas, a cultural synthesis that signified the profound impact of Alexander's conquests. Individuals like Seleucus I Nicator navigated the treacherous waters of governance with a blend of shrewdness and desperation, aware that the empire's longevity depended not on military conquests alone, but on the delicate balance of assimilation and respect for local customs. Amid this backdrop of power struggles and cultural interplay, the Macedonian legacy began to take on a life of its own. The once unified vision of Alexander transformed into a multitude of fragmented identities, each successor state carving its niche while simultaneously bearing the weight of Alexander's dreams. The cities founded in his name, Alexandria, Alexandria Escate, stood testament to a vision that extended beyond mere conquest. They were multi-ethnic hubs of learning and commerce, where the echoes of Greek philosophy met the rich traditions of the East. This cultural synthesis was not without its challenges, as local populations adapted to their new rulers while grappling with the implications of Hellenistic ideals. Yet the ambition of the Diadochi came at a price. As they sought to consolidate power, wars erupted, each skirmish a harbinger of the instability that would define the next several centuries. The Battle of Ipsus in 301 BCE, a decisive confrontation among the rival factions, exemplified the violent struggle for dominance in a land once unified under a single charismatic leader. The blood spilled on the battlefield bore witness to the fragility of the empire's legacy, a legacy that would continue to fracture and reform under the weight of human ambition. As decades turned into centuries, the implications of Alexander's empire reverberated through the tapestry of history. The cultural and political landscapes shifted like sand, each grain representing a choice made, a battle fought, or a legacy forged. The Hellenistic period ushered in a new age of philosophy and science, with thinkers such as Epicurus and Archimedes laying the groundwork for future generations. The reverberations of this intellectual flowering would not only inspire the Romans, but would also permeate the very fabric of Western civilization. The intermingling of cultures, born out of the desire to connect amid fragmentation, became a defining feature of the ancient world, a world forever changed by the ambition of one man and the ensuing chaos. The silence of the ruins that now dotted the once glorious landscape served as a testament to the duality of Alexander's legacy, a legacy that was as much about brilliant syntheses as it was about agonizing divisions. The successors were left with a complex inheritance, one that would compel their descendants to navigate the delicate balance between ambition and restraint. Thus, the story of the fragmented empire did not simply end with the clash of swords. It continued to unfold in the halls of learning, the bustling markets, and the quiet corners of cities where the echoes of the past intertwined with the hopes of the present. In the aftermath of such monumental upheaval, the ancient world bore the marks of Alexander's vision.